Hey guys, how are you? This is Kate Plato, and I'm coming to you now to share with you a little bit about my first lesson plan. I will actually be teaching a class in the fall here at UMass Boston called The Art of Literature. And because of that, I wanted to focus this lesson plan on a text that I plan on teaching in that course. The focus of the course is really around violence, and our first unit focuses on otherworldly violence, which obviously could mean a number of different things, and I'll be using a number of different texts. But I think that the major text that I'm going to bring into it is the book of Job from the Old Testament. Victor Hugo said, "Tomorrow, if all literature was to be destroyed, and if it was left to me to retain only one work, I should choose Job." The reason that he said that, and I think the reason that so many other academics and literary figures have found the book of Job to be so compelling, is that it is not just a biblical text, it is not just a non secular text, it is a beautiful piece of literature. And I think also this kind of focus or this theme of why do bad things happen to good people is just universal. It's not something that was only relevant in the 5th century BCE. This is something that I think most of us have wondered at one point or another. Additionally, I think that the type of writing, the epilogue and the prologue, are both in prose, while the body of the work is this just like absolutely beautiful Hebrew biblical poetry. I think that bringing that together and being able to discuss the use of poetry, the use of prose within this text, and how they both work to create this contained, beautiful piece of work. It's also a piece of dramatic literature. It has been compared to Greek tragedy. However, the difference there, besides the fact that Greek tragedy is not in a particular piece of religious text, is that there's no actual chorus. But other than that, it's very similar to the structure of a Greek tragedy. And additionally, the text itself can be seen as being somewhat didactic in nature. But that being said, it is not shove the moral of the story in your face, but rather it really invites interpretation, which I think is super important for these students to really begin to read a text and embrace the opportunity to interpret the work and to recognize that they have this opportunity and they have the agency to interpret this work rather than sitting there and having a teacher or a book, an academic, kind of feeding them an interpretation that they just have to swallow. As far as my lesson plan is concerned, I've created a lesson plan that will teach this text in 1 week. Our first unit, I believe, is only 3 weeks long, and to avoid only using this text in the first unit, I've decided to make it a 1 week, 3-day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday course. On the first day, I'm going to introduce this question of why do bad things happen to good people, ask where in literature do they see this coming up, and I'm going to provide for them the basis for which we will be discussing and reading the book of Job. I do have 2 different artifacts. My first artifact is the first homework assignment, which is that after the first class, I expect all of my students to read the text, which in and of itself is about 27 pages long. I will expect for them to read it either from a Bible, a King James version of the Bible, or from a website that I think is UMich, and that's the university has written it all out. So it will allow for us all to be reading from the same translation. And I bring up a number of questions as to what they're seeing, especially where do they see different types of literary functions, specifically similes and metaphors, and what those similes and metaphors do for the text as a whole. And then upon returning to the class, we can have a discussion of the text as a whole and how they responded to it and what they saw as being particularly relevant or particularly engaging and what they thought was more confusing or more off-putting. And we could have that kind of discussion. And after the second class, I would want them to go home and do homework assignment number 2. And that homework assignment asks for them to read a hip hop poetry rendition of conversations that take place in the body of the text between Job and his friends. And once they have read this, I want them to reflect upon what it is that they think adds to this story by reading a more updated contemporary version, or what seems to get lost in translation. Additionally, I would want for them to create for me in poetry form one one exchange between Job and one of his friends. And the reasoning for that is that it doesn't just require a close reading of the text, but it requires for them to read and interpret the text. And this will hopefully kind of push them in the direction that I'm looking for them to be going in for the duration of the semester. So I hope this makes sense. Some of my confusion is, I don't know, is, a bulk of my confusion or concern is whether or not using a biblical text will go over well. I have spoken with Alex about this, and he is enthusiastic about this text. I am personally so enthusiastic about this text, just kind of holding my breath as to whether or not I'll get some pushback on the biblical nature of the text. But other than that, I'm so excited about the possibility and the opportunity to teach it, and I welcome any feedback or suggestions. Thank you.